restaurant and they had to close the restaurant.
Hey, my dad may have gained a little weight, but he's not some kind of food-crazed maniac.
Ralphie does a great job of illustrating how silly it is to repeat a referent over and over and over again. We don't need to hear the word restaurant 3 times, we just need to hear it once. And when we do hear it 3 times, we're likely to make the same face that Lisa is making, even if it's for different reasons. Things don't always need to be explicitly expressed in speech. On the other hand, we do have problems with ambiguity. In this series, we'll start to explore some of the ways we control for ambiguity, and then we'll see some of the ways in which we use those controls to increase efficiency in speech. We met ambiguity earlier when Derek Bentley told his fellow Candy Factory caper to let him have it, Chris. Christopher Craig shot a cop, and when Bentley was on trial for accessorizing that murder, the lawyer claimed that let him have it is ambiguous. It can mean more than one thing. Well, actually, we have this problem a lot. Look at the phrase, the boy chased his sister with a stick. It is ambiguous. If you have trouble seeing the ambiguity, it's probably because you are more likely to infer one meaning over another. But there are 2 possibilities. The boy has a stick and is threatening his sister with it, or the boy is chasing one of possibly several sisters, and the speaker is designating that the sister who has the stick is the one being chased. Now, some linguists will argue that the likelihood of some interpretations over others is loaded by uses of transitive, for example. Chase is a transitive verb, and we need a direct object to fully decode the semantic value of chase. As a result, the entire phrase and its embeds will most likely be decoded as a part of the transitive predicate as well. Maybe, but if we changed a stick with a different noun phrase, like his cookie, we'll see that the parts of speech are being overruled by the entailments of what role a cookie could be playing in the scene. In other words, the boy chased his sister with a cookie seems more ambiguous, in part because why would she be running away from the offer of a cookie? We start to try to solve ambiguity with reason. In truth, we rely on a lot more than just reason to solve the problem. In English, we solve ambiguity to find clarity with suprasegmentals. Suprasegmentals are changes to intensity, length, and pitch on specific words. They are the stress patterns and tonal changes that happen over an utterance. For example, if I uttered the later noun phrase, sister with a stick, more quickly, it would sound more connected. I could also emphasize certain words by elongating the vowels. The boy chased his sister with a stick. In that last noun, stick, I made a little drop in frequency. It carries more emphasis, but even surprise. My point is that suprasegmentals, stress and pitch changes, will often clarify ambiguity. If I asked, do you want this pizza? And you respond, I want that pizza, I'm more likely to hear the emphasis on that and assume that you mean the other one from the one that I offered. Of course, context and world knowledge will go a long way to help solve these as well, but I'll be dealing with those in a future lesson. Let's discover the 2 forms of ambiguity, at least at the phrase or utterance level. Lexical ambiguity are situations where a word, a lexical unit, has several meanings available. We may have to parse them out. Bob's best friend is a dog is lexically ambiguous. We might assume that this means that Bob has a canine companion and that his dog fits a true man's best friend. But it could also mean that Bob has an ugly friend and you just decided to be very mean about him. Why would you say that about Bob's friend anyway? Syntactic ambiguity happens when a phrase, like a prepositional phrase, could be understood as modifying more than one dominant phrase. In Ron ate the steak with ketchup, there are 3 dominant phrases: the subject, the verb phrase, and the direct object phrase. The prepositional phrase with ketchup is subordinate to one of them. Lexically, it cannot fit Ron, so that's out. It could modify ate, or it could modify steak. as opposed to the steak that doesn't have ketchup already on it. To be clear, syntactical ambiguity is ambiguity. It's not a lack of clarity. Dangling participles are actually lexical errors. When a person writes, driving to the store, the rain was pouring down, it's not syntactically ambiguous. In fact, it's lexically wrong. Driving to the store cannot modify any of the dominant phrases. Rain can't drive. If you rewrote that sentence with the same participle and other parts of speech, you would get a sensible utterance. Driving to the store, Mary was crying. In this case, the participle phrase driving to the store is modifying Mary. It works lexically, so the ambiguity is resolved. So how do we limit ambiguity? We already met suprasegmentals. We do this in part with speech stress and pauses. When I say, let's eat grandma, you probably think this sounds sadistically gross and inappropriate. Why would we eat grandma? But if I pause, just ever so slightly, and then turn the pitch up on grandma, grandma, instead of down, grandma, then you hear an entirely different phrase, don't you? In writing, we can limit ambiguity with punctuation, which, as in this case, may well save lives. Context, world knowledge, and assumptions will go a long way to help clarify things, but we also rely upon a couple of other strategies. One of these is to change the structure through lexical markers. Simile is a good example of this. Whereas in metaphor, like Bob's friend is a dog, the figurative option is embedded in the meaning of dog. It's ambiguous. A simile is less ambiguous and more precise. Bob's friend looks like a dog, doesn't require the listener to choose whether the dog is literal or figurative. In the same way, changing the lexical choices for prepositions can affect the ketchup problem. Ron chose the steak that had ketchup gives us a clearer understanding that Ron is selecting pre-ketchup steak as opposed to ruining his steak on his own. One way this happens is by changes in syntax that are entirely hidden unless the sentence is analyzed. The classic example of this is in the difference between Jeff is easy to please versus Jeff is eager to please. In the first, Jeff is the direct object of easy to please. In the second, Jeff is the subject. The phrase describes what Jeff wants to do. This is an example of the hidden or silent changes in syntax that disambiguate the utterance. Different adjectives infer different syntactic structures. In our last video, we discovered that there are infinite loops of recursion available in an utterance. The boy ate can become infinitely complex. The young and very hungry boy ate 2 pizzas with extra pepperoni, cheese, and peppers. I could go on and on if I wanted to. And the listener can become overwhelmed trying to hold all of the modifying elements to a single verb phrase. One way to limit this is to introduce a new verb phrase. The addition of a new verb phrase will provide some structure to the previously very long clause. It subordinates a verb phrase to the prepositional phrase. In this case, the young boy ate the pizza that was left on the counter has introduced a verb phrase, was left. This helps organize and disambiguate. In this case, the pizza that was left on the counter is actually a clause. It's dependent upon the more dominant clause, the boy ate. I see this a great deal in doctoral students' writing. They'll have an entire paragraph that has an independent clause tucked somewhere down in the middle of the paragraph. I assume because they think this is advanced writing. It is complex, but that doesn't necessarily make it clear. Another way to do this, especially in speech, is to create clauses that are connected with conjunctions that illustrate the relationship between the clauses. Conjunctions do more than connect clauses. They direct the relationship between the clauses. They are like railroad switches that decide where the meaning will go. As a kid, you probably learned and then forgot that there are 3 categories of these conjunctions: coordinating, subordinating, and correlative. They join clauses together, but they also direct the relationship between them. Look at these 2 clauses. I left the house. I got COVID. We can combine these two clauses in such a way as to disambiguate their relationship. I left the house and I got COVID indicates a very different relationship of time and causation. I left the house first, and then as a result of being out in the public, I got COVID. Or, in the second conjunction, the relationship is exactly opposite. I left the house because I got COVID implies first that contracting COVID was the precursor event, and that it necessitated leaving the house. We still wonder why, but we see the claim of cause and timing has been flipped. So the conjunctions are doing more than breaking those clauses down. They are providing clarity and direction. In the next video, I'll spend some time looking at how we manipulate phrases to bring about greater disambiguation and in many cases, making things a little more efficient as well.